He went to uncover the secrets of a cursed village. But what he found in Eleru was not meant for the living. They warned him. Every elder in the next town over. They said the village of Eleru wasn't on any recent map. That no one who entered ever returned. But Dayo wasn't superstitious. He was a journalist, hungry for the story that would make his name. So, he packed his bag, told his mother he'd be back by Sunday, and took a bike into the bush. No signal. No lights. Just whispers in the trees. Now, here's the part nobody prepared him for. He wasn't the only one who went in. But he might be the only one coming out if he survives the night. Dayo had heard the stories all his life. That no one who entered the village of Eleru ever returned the same if they returned at all. But that never stopped him. Not when his own brother was one of the disappeared. He arrived just before dusk, his boots covered in red dust and his backpack slung over one shoulder. The road narrowed into a single trail of cracked earth and overgrown weeds. At the entrance, a rusted iron arch bore the words, "Turn back or be buried here." Beneath it, chicken feathers, broken bottles, and an upside-down calabash told him the locals didn't take kindly to visitors. Dayo didn't flinch. He walked in. The silence was deafening. A woman pulling a bucket of water stopped halfway. A boy dropped his slingshot and ran. The blacksmith froze, hammer in the air. Conversations died. Doors closed. Eleru didn't like strangers. But Dayo wasn't just any stranger, he was a brother on a mission. He found lodging in the outskirts. A half-crumbling hut run by an old woman called Momarisi. She was blind in one eye and spoke in whispers, but she didn't turn him away. "They don't ask questions in Eleru," she murmured that night as she handed him a plate of yam. "Because answers get people killed." That night, he couldn't sleep. The air was too still. The darkness too complete. Then came the knock, soft, deliberate. He sat up. Silence. He opened the door and looked around. Nothing. But when he looked down, he saw it, 5 words scratched into the wood. "Leave now or vanish too." He stared at the message, jaw clenched. They knew who he was. Or at least, why he was here. 6 months ago, his younger brother, Korit, had sent one final message. They found out. "If I don't make it, tell Mama I tried." That was the last anyone heard from him. Nobody. No phone. Just silence. Dayo wasn't here to ask. He was here to uncover. And if necessary, to burn Eleru to the ground. He began asking around the next day. No one answered. Not even the children. It was as if fear had gripped the soul of the village and squeezed it shut. But then he saw her. At the corner of a blackened compound, a woman stood behind a faded curtain. Her face was scarred on one side, like fire had kissed it and left its mark. Her eyes followed him like she knew who he was before he even spoke. He didn't approach her. Not yet. He knew something most people forgot: answers in places like Eleru didn't come when you knocked. They came when the village believed you wouldn't run. When the night came and you were still standing. And Dayo. He didn't plan on running. Not until he found the truth. The next morning, Eleru was colder than it had any right to be. The sun rose, but its warmth refused to touch the village. Dayo stepped outside, boots crunching dry earth, eyes locked on the compound where he'd seen her, the woman with the burn mark. She was waiting. Leaning on the rusted gate, she met his gaze. "You're Korit's brother," she said, voice like gravel on stone. Dayo didn't deny it. "Yes." She nodded. "Then you should know, he didn't just vanish. He found something. Something he shouldn't have." Dayo's heart thudded. "What did he find?" She stepped aside. "Come in." Inside her compound was chaos, broken mirrors nailed to tree trunks, a wall made of cracked pots, and rows of tied animal bones dangling from the roof like charms. Dayo scanned the space but didn't speak. He knew better than to mock a warning wrapped in madness. "My name is Eleru," she said, sitting on a worn stool. "I was like you once. Curious. Brave. Stupid." She tossed something toward him, a torn ID card. "Corrids. Burned at the edges. He came here to report on the oil thefts and missing villagers. He poked into the wrong house." "Mine." Dayo clenched the ID. "You set him up?" "No. I tried to help him." Her voice cracked. "But there are rules in Eleru." The moment he entered the forest at the back of Chief Folola's compound, he was marked. Marked. She pointed to her face. "This is what they do to people who survive what they are not supposed to see." Dayo's breath caught. What did he see? Eleru didn't answer. She picked up a knife and sliced open a woven mat on the ground. Beneath it, a pit. Small. Lined with blood-soaked cloth and sealed bags. They call it Egh, the witch tree. It's buried beneath Folola's land. They feed it. Feed it, with what? People. Blood. Secrets. And it gives back power, money, protection. Dayo felt a rise in his throat. Eleru leaned close. "Tonight. Go there. But if you step on that land, you either bring back your brother, or become just another whisper in the forest." He left her compound with the ID card and a storm in his chest. If Folola was behind this, and the entire village was keeping quiet, then the problem was bigger than he thought. At nightfall, Dayo stood at the edge of Chief Folola's land, breathing in courage like poison. He didn't have a weapon. Only Corrid's ID and a phone tucked into his sock. He scaled the wall quietly, landing in the overgrown garden. Torches burned in the distance. Drums stomped low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat counting down. He crouched low, crept toward the source of the sound. And then he saw it. Not a shrine. Not a meeting. A ceremony. 10 men in red wrappers knelt around the pit. Chief Folola stood at the center. And in front of him, Corrid. Bound. Bruised. But alive. Dayo's gasp was too loud. One of the men looked up. "Who's there?" Dayo turned to run, but behind him, a hand gripped his shirt. It was a boy. No older than 12. With pitch-black eyes and no tongue. He pointed toward the forest. Toward the place Dayo had promised himself he would never go. Dayo had heard. The boy's grip was cold. Not like death, colder. His eyes, pure black, held Dayo still without words. Slowly, he pointed toward the dense forest behind the compound. As if warning or inviting. Then he vanished. Dayo staggered back, breath ragged. A child like that, what was he? Why was he here? But there was no time to process it. Voices rose behind the compound. "They heard you," Dayo muttered to himself, heart racing. He turned and ran. Not toward the road. That would be too easy. He followed the boy's direction, into the forest. Behind him, shouts rang out. "Find him." The moment Dayo crossed the tree line, the forest swallowed the sound. Silence wrapped around him like a blanket soaked in fear. It wasn't just dark. It was wrong. No crickets. No wind. No footsteps behind him, but he knew they were coming. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. And then he saw it, a mound, half buried in the dirt. A pile of broken cameras, cracked phones, and notebooks, all weather-worn. He picked up one. It had Corrid's name scribbled inside. He flipped through pages. The last entry read, "If I don't make it out, tell Dayo this place is alive." Not the people. The ground. The trees. It watches. It remembers. And it hates trespassers. A crack of a twig behind him made Dayo whirl around. Nothing. Then suddenly, a scream. Not human. Not animal. The trees shook violently, though the wind was still. And from the shadows emerged a figure. Not Folola. Not a villager. A man covered in black paint, with thorns embedded in his skin. He carried a staff made of human jawbones. Dayo turned to run, but the forest shifted. The path behind him closed. Trapped. He backed away slowly until he tripped on something soft. A body. No, bodies. 3, buried in the underbrush. Their faces twisted in terror. One wore a reporter's badge. Another had a military uniform. The third was a woman, her hands clutched a red necklace. The ground beneath Dayo began to hum. The man with the jawbone staff spoke, in a language Dayo had never heard, but somehow understood. You were not called? Then he raised the staff. A flash of heat surged toward Dayo, but it stopped midair. A glow erupted from his chest. Korit's ID. No, not the card. What was inside it? Dayo pulled it out and saw something wedged between the lamination, a thin strip of bark. Dark, with ancient carvings. The forest groaned. The staff wielder fell back, eyes wide. You carry the old seal. The trees shifted again, this time creating a path. A way out. Dayo didn't hesitate. He ran. Branches clawed at his skin. Thorns sliced his arms. But he didn't stop. He burst out of the forest and collapsed on the roadside, even. A pair of headlights flashed. It was Ebinoloa's bike. You went in, she asked, lifting him. He nodded, shaking. Did you see the watcher? Dayo looked at the back in his hand. Yes. And I think Korit is still alive. She stared toward the woods. Then you have to go back. He wanted to scream, to cry, to refuse. But deep down, he already knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far darker. The rain came hard that night, pounding the rusted rooftops of Eleru and turning the red earth to sludge. Ebinoloa patched Dayo's wounds with steady hands and a silence that felt like grief. He sat inside her shrine, a circular hut lined with bones, dried herbs, and hanging charms. The walls breathed, or so it felt. You should have died in there, she said finally. I know. But the seal protected you. That bark. She pointed to the carved sliver in his hand, is not just a key. It's a memory. Dayo looked up. A memory of what? She hesitated. Then, of betrayal. She stood, walking toward a carved wooden box. From it, she pulled a folded cloth and a journal, old, brittle. She opened it and showed him a drawing. The village, years ago. And in the center, a tree, so massive it dwarfed every hut. Beneath it, elders knelt. A boy stood in front of them. That's Folola, Dayo whispered. Ebinoloa nodded. He was once chosen to guard the sacred tree. But something happened, the watcher turned on us. And Folola, instead of sealing it, made a pact. Dayo clenched his fist. So he became what? A priest of the forest. No. He became its mouth. Its voice. The forest doesn't just kill outsiders, it consumes memories. It feeds on pain. That's why no one ever leaves. Dayo looked down at the back again. Then how do I fight something like that? You don't fight it. You remind it. You show it the truth. The thing Folola tried to erase. And Korit, he asked. Is he still inside? Deep. In the whispering grove. But if you go back, there's no turning around. You'll need 3 things: the bark, fire, and blood. A bit of silence. Yours or Folola's? The grove doesn't care. The next morning, Dayo left with nothing but a torch, a machete, and the bag sealed in a cloth pouch. He crossed the same trail, past the camera mound, past the bones. Deeper. Until he reached it. The Whispering Grove. The trees here were unlike any others, twisted, with faces embedded in their trunks. Eyes closed. Mouths murmuring. As he stepped in, their whispers grew louder. Stay. Remember. Bleed. He kept walking. The ground turned soft beneath his feet. Not mud. Flesh. He found Korid's watch first. Then his boots. Then finally, Korid himself, bound in vine, barely breathing, his eyes glassy. Korid! Dayo shouted, rushing over. But when he touched him, the forest roared. Folola stepped out of the mist, holding a staff made of spine. You again, he snarled. No. Me, for the last time, Dayo said. He pulled the torch and lit it. The fire blazed, but didn't touch Folola. Folola raised his staff, and the trees lunged. Dayo held up the bark. And everything stopped. The faces in the trees opened their eyes. Folola screamed, not in pain, but fear. The memories were returning. The truth. The forest twisted violently, rejecting him. Dayo dropped the torch at Folola's feet. The fire caught, and Folola burned. But the trees didn't resist. They fed on it as if purging their wrath. Dayo collapsed beside Korid as the vines let go. Korid gasped. You came. Of course. Behind them, the forest groaned and began to fold inward, slowly sealing itself shut. Dayo and Korid stumbled out of the Whispering Grove as the morning sun began to pierce through the fog. The forest behind them was no longer whispering, it was silent, as if mourning. The path that once led them into Eleru now looked unfamiliar. The air smelled of ash and earth. But they were alive. At the edge of the grove, Ebunaloa stood waiting. You did it, she said softly. No, Dayo replied. The forest did. It remembered. Korid clutched his side. I saw things in there. My mother, my childhood. Even things I forgot about myself. That place, it's more than cursed. It's ancient. Ebunaloa nodded. Eleru was built on bones. The kind of history that doesn't want to stay buried. You helped it grieve. They walked in silence until they reached the village. But what they saw made them stop. The villagers had gathered at the square, staring at the forest, whispering in fear and awe. For the first time in decades, the boundary markings around Eleru had faded. Someone pointed. They came back. They survived. But how? Elder Bamedil stepped forward, older than time, his walking stick trembling. The watcher is gone, he said. How do you know? Dayo asked. The old man looked at the sky. Because I can finally sleep. Suddenly, a young girl from the village approached them. She handed Dayo a charcoal sketch. It was a drawing of the forest, with faces in the trees and a man holding a feathered staff. That's you, she whispered. He looked at it for a long moment. No, he said. That's what I could have become. Later that day, as they sat in front of Ebunaloa's hut, Korid finally asked the question that lingered in the air. What now? Dayo sighed. We take the story back. We tell people what happened here. No one will believe us. They don't have to, Dayo said, pulling out the back again. It was now blackened, burned at the edges, but still intact. But they will remember. As evening fell, the village called a gathering. For the first time in Eleru's memory, they allowed strangers, outsiders, to speak. Dayo stood and spoke of the pact, the watcher, the forest hunger and its pain. He didn't embellish. He didn't have to. The elders listened. And when he was done, they handed him something wrapped in cloth, a red insignia, stitched with feathers and ash. "You're not a stranger anymore," Elder Bamedil said. "You're a bridge." Corrie chuckled. "You always did like dramatic exits." Dayo smiled. The next morning, they left Eleru, no spirits, no blood, no flames behind them. Just the hum of trees and the quiet of peace. But as they passed the final edge of the village, Dayo stopped. He looked back. Just once. And for a brief second, in the shadows between the trees, he saw a woman made of smoke, watching. She did not follow. She only nodded. And then vanished.